So with some patients, I have to go a little bit more simple. And I like this quote from Steve Jobs: "A designer knows when he has achieved perfection, not when there is nothing more to add, but yet when there is nothing left to take away." It's a concept, what was the concept of Apple. And this was Buddy's approach. So this is Buddy Mopra, who's in fact one of the owners of this center here, and the guy who developed pretty much most of his composites in front of you. His approach is much, much simpler. I would say his approach is perhaps more simple than mine. I've taken his approach and just modified it so I can produce certain effects that may be more applicable in Europe rather than the US. But anyway, the concept is you obviously use the same amount of composite because you've got to fill the same hole, but you use far fewer shades. And you create the effects rather than with true translucency in the incisal edge and true opalescence in the incisal edge. You create the effects by painting them on with tints. What are the advantages? You need less composite in your drawer in terms of shades, so there's less decision making to make. The actual technique is a lot less technique sensitive, let's say. So I'm not saying you have to take less care, but it's a lot easier to do, and it's a lot more forgiving of error in terms of thickness. So it saves a lot of time. How fast is it? I would say I could do a resin veneer in half the time using this approach. So it's quite useful for some patients, and it's very simple, and I don't find it very stressful at all to do this. So this is how we do it. There's the prep. I'm going to talk about the prep on the hands-on. Then we make a stent from the wax up. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, as you recall with the natural layering, I've made a very, very thin shell on the platel, either out of the incisal light or the milky white occlusal. And the function of that was to allow light to transmit through so I could create that blue effect. This is the exact opposite. What I do is I build half of the tooth thickness, half of the thickness palatal buccal palatally, in either, my ideal is a microhybrid, or if you're used to using the nano, you can use the nano. The microhybrid usually of the appropriate shade. So these teeth, these are denture teeth, are like an A2. So I'm going to use an A2 microhybrid in there. Can you see it's blocking the light out already because it's quite opaque? Sometimes when you put the microhybrid in like that, it still looks a bit grey. Alright, that's probably about half the time. If it still looks a bit grey, you need something more opaque over it. So at that point, I'm going to consider painting on the surface. There's, where are they? Yeah, no, that's a flowable. There we go. These products here in the blue tube, these are flowable composites, but they're opaque, highly opaque. In fact, this is the most opaque one on the market that you can buy in varying shades. So I choose the appropriate shade. In this case, it will be A2. And I paint this flowable composite using the wider brush, the number 3 brush, on the surface, and that blocks out light transmission. You basically place your microhybrid and then have a look at it, and if it looks grey, then you need to use the creative colour opaquer, and if it doesn't look grey, you're good to go without the opaquer. You just need to make a decision on the day. If you look at it, you can see it's slightly concave, like so. Reason why I place that concave is to allow room to put the other shades over the top. So we talked about putting the opaquer. This goes from, if I use the opaquer, you see now it's blocking out the light better with the opaquer, it's a little bit less grey. You can take it right to the incisal edge if you want. I don't. I usually start about here and then come down. The reason why I don't put the opaquer over that incisal is because I want it to be grey there. Do you see what I mean? It's allowing the light to pass through, so it's giving me a bit of that opalescence effect just by not having opacity there. Do you follow that? So I paint it from here, just towards the margin here. This is my bevel, where I've finished the preparation. I don't take it right to the bevel, but I take it close. I take it maybe 1 to 2 millimeters away from the bevel. If you take it right to the bevel, you're going to have an opaque line right at your bevel, so you want to avoid that. You light cure that, then over the top of that, you place what we call a chromatic enamel. Now, these teeth are all A2, yeah? So I'm going to choose an A2 resin. Remember, this is not taking any stress, and I want it to behave like enamel. So what material am I probably going to choose? Probably choose a microfill, right? Why? Because it's got the best polishability and it's got a little bit of translucency, which is going to help blend it here. So I take the microfill over here, it's full thickness here, and just in this incisal 1 to 2 millimeters, it's under thickness. How much by? 0.2, 0.3 millimeters, hair's width. Right, you have to eyeball it. Now, you remember with the natural layering, I made this very irregular. Yeah? This, I'm going to keep really flat and really smooth. The reason is because I want to paint on some tints. And if I paint on the tints and it's really irregular and rough, it just bleeds and runs everywhere. So, next we take our tints. We have the option of a violet and a grey. I sometimes use a grey alone, but it can look a bit harsh. The violet just looks a little bit too much, a little bit too warm. So Corky, who's actually another lecturer at the centre, is actually a very good teacher, and had this concept of mixing it half and half, which is quite a smart idea because you get what's called a warm grey, which is kind of an oxymoron, but you get the idea. You just take a blob of violet and a blob of grey and mix them together. It works really nicely. And you pick that up with a brush and you just paint it on the incisal edge to recreate that kind of grey effect there. You've got to be sparing. Then over the top of that, we're going to be using a highly translucent achromatic enamel. What would I be choosing, would you imagine? Incisal light, incisal medium, microfill.
Are you curing after each stage of shape?
Yes, yeah. I would encourage you just to give it a zap of maybe 10 to 15 seconds between each stage, particularly with the tints, because if you don't cure the tints, they bleed into each other and it looks terrible, like a Jackson Pollock painting, but there we go. So, let's have a look at a case that's so polished. Let's show you an actual clinical case. This is a lady from my town. She's actually a really nice lady I've been treating for years. Her hobbies are going shopping and having lunch with her friends, right? And we've done quite a lot of treatment for her. We did some perio work. We've done some implants in her posterior units. She had all her posterior units restored with a combination of implants, fixed pros, and just regular crown and bridge. And that was quite a lot of treatment, to be quite honest. And then we got to her anteriors, and I said, oh, it's time, maybe now we can do some grafting here, and we can replace this crown and replace these composites. This had a composite in place, replace these composites. And she said, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to get this done now. I'm going to hang on. And every time I saw her over the next 3 or 4 years, I said, how about we get this done? No, I'm not ready for it yet, so it was one of those. So one morning, my office manager comes in and she says, oh, I've got this patient, and she's an emergency appointment. So the way we deal with emergencies is we like to offer a good service. So if a patient calls in the morning, I will see that patient at the end of my scheduled treatment time, at the end of the morning, into my lunch, usually for about 5 or 10 minutes, do a basic exam of the problem, take a radiograph if necessary, and schedule them in to get that treatment fixed in the next couple of days. The office manager schedules me this patient, very nice lady, and she comes in and says, I lost the composite you've been telling me to replace for the last 5 years. I say, okay, not unexpected. I said, okay, what we can do, I do a very quick exam. I take a radiograph, and I just took an alginate of that, and I said, what I'm going to do is, you go away, I'll get you booked in, I think it was a Monday, I'll get you booked in on like Wednesday. In the meantime, I'll get some models up, I'll do a little wax up, I'll make a stent, we'll do a really nice job with some natural layering, we may even consider doing this one. And she goes, huh? I said, well, I just need to do a little wax up and make a stent and get this fixed. Because we don't have time in our schedule right now to do this. And she said, really? I can't possibly walk around like this. It's completely unacceptable. I need to get this done now. So I look at my nurse, and my nurse looks down at the floor. And I say, okay, so we're going to do it now. So we have limited time to do this. I have no stent. So I'm going to do this I'm going to do this with a simplified approach, not natural layering. I'm just going to get it done. So, here we go. We isolate, rub it down. No floss ties. Why? No time, no necessity. I don't need to floss tie this because I've got this huge area here. I don't need to rub it down so much. I put a bevel here. You see the bevel running down? Then, high-tech finger behind the tooth, etch, primer, bond, finger behind the tooth, and I put in the microhybrid of the appropriate shade. I don't recall the shades because I was so busy. She's a A3, I would say, maybe A35. So it's kind of A3, A35 microhybrid. I've deliberately left a space there. Can you see that? The good instrument I'd like to use for that, which I use all the time, this is perhaps the best instrument on the tray, is this one. It's the IPCL, the very thin, bendy, flat plastic. This is a beautiful instrument. It's in fact the best one Cosmedent make. And what I do is I take the IPCL between the teeth there and just separate it up. Then, over the top of that, I put my microfill of the appropriate shade, A3 probably, and I've still separated it just, can you see it's just with the IPCL? This is where the IPCL works really well because it's really thin. Now I'm winning, yeah? This has taken me about 10 minutes all in. Now, you see here, it's kind of orange. And it's not there. And she's got a little bit of white there, and it's kind of bluish there, a little bit there. So what I'm going to do now is add tints. You see the difference now? So here, I've gone with the dark brown here and here. I put a little bit of white here and here, and a little bit of violet there. So now this whole incisal edge is blending in, yeah? This looks a little bit too chromatic. It looks a little bit too saturated. Can you see that? I'm not worried about that at the moment because when I put my incisal light or incisal medium over the top, that will drop the saturation bit. That will act as a light filter and make it look less saturated. So now, over the top of that, I'm going to use my achromatic microfill, which will be my probably incisal light, in this case probably incisal medium actually. You see how she's got greyish teeth? So we're going to probably go incisal medium on that. I used a pull-through technique with a mylar strip. We were talking about strips, just using regular strips yesterday. I'll demonstrate that on the hands-on later. Now I'm winning, yeah? So now I'm going to polish it like so. About 10 minutes. Can you see these lines here? Scalpel blade, 15. Done. Good day. 40 minutes. So you can do pretty high-end aesthetics pretty quickly with multiple shades if you know which materials to use, and you can rapidly select them and use a very simple approach. If I'd done that natural layering, it probably would take an hour, and I would run into my next patient and not be able to eat my sandwiches. I think probably is a good time to take a little break, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, have a little stretch, have a wander around, and then we'll talk about shade determination in class 4 beginning to get end.